Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome back to part 2 with Jane Anson as we dig deeper into the wonderful world of Bordeaux. Now, if you missed part 1, go back. We're talking about en primeur, Petrus in space, Bordeaux blends in China. But this episode, we're going to be talking about the Bordeaux Pirates. Jane lets us know about some of the innovative sustainability and environmental practices being adopted by Bordeaux wineries. And with the rise of natural and organic winemaking movements globally, she'll be talking to us about how Bordeaux is responding to these trends and who the standout producers are that are pioneering these approaches in the region, and smaller family-owned wineries that are producing outstanding wines that we need to know about. We'll also be talking about some of the lesser known grape varieties in Bordeaux that may be making an appearance or a comeback, I should say. And Jane will be mentioning some of her favourite lesser known Bordeaux subregions and appellations that we should know about that are producing exceptional wines. So lots of inner secrets in this episode. Now, if after this episode you are after a bottle of great value Bordeaux from one of the satellite regions that Jane mentions, I am happy to say that my sponsor of this season, Wickham's Wine, the link is in the show notes, carry several of them. So go over to their website, use the code EATSLEEP10 for 10% off your first order, and enjoy getting to know Bordeaux better. Right. Well, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it. So pour yourself that glass of wine and enjoy. You are the queen of Inside Bordeaux. God. So I would love for you to share with everybody listening. Yeah, sorry. I know. But it's true. What's going on? Maybe what have you seen in the last decade, maybe, of winemaking practices, things that have been changing, some shifts, some emerging trends that are quite interesting?
This has been a brilliant decade, I would say, if you're interested in winemaking, which is more about what's happening in the vineyard rather than just in the cellar. So without question, as in many, many regions, you've seen Bordeaux shifting towards more organic, more biodynamic, more biodiversity is probably even more important. I think organic, over the last couple of years, it's been super tough because of the climate. It's not necessarily that it's getting hotter, although it is, but it's getting much more chaotic. So you're having longer periods of frost that can come later, or you're having mildew issues because it's hot and wet in June and July. This is happening regularly. So it's been super tough for organic producers. But the reality is the trend is towards no herbicides, no pesticides, far less chemicals, and being aware that people care about these things. And particularly the top estates, if they're charging hundreds of euros per bottle, they better make sure that they're giving a wine which is made in the best possible way and is a wine which will be able to hand over to the next generation and do all of those things. So we're definitely seeing that, and that's super exciting. The other thing that's happening in Bordeaux is there's this like a group called Bordeaux Pirates, and Bordeaux Pirates are smaller independent producers who are, again, you have to be either organic or in conversion, but people who may be using that kind of there are some natural winemakers here, so moving towards that natural wine movement, but it's just people who are trying to do things differently, who are not following the same old history and the same old story of how you bring a Bordeaux wine to market. So those guys would not be selling en primeur. They'll be selling direct to their consumers. They'll be going out to the market and finding small wine bars to sell through and all of that kind of stuff. So you're definitely seeing more creative ways of Bordeaux winemakers getting out there. You've also got some quite interesting things like ungrafted wines. So that means like wines that are I guess it gets a bit nerdy at that point, but most wines in the world are put onto a rootstock because
Nerd away.
because of the big vine diseases of phylloxera of the 19th century. And you're now starting to have producers who are thinking, hang on a minute, do we need to be using those vine stocks? And what would happen if we just make our wine on its own roots, of its own original roots? You're seeing a bit of that happening in Bordeaux as well. There's a lot of, I think maybe because this big gap is happening between the guys at the top who are generally making a lot of money and who are very well established, and then there's a big gap now between them and the smaller producers. And so the small producers who are smart are finding ways to reinvent themselves, to come to market in a different way. During En Primeur, I was tasting in Castillon, which is an appellation that I really respect and I think is not that well known, and there are loads of brilliant producers. And now I can't remember the name of it, but I will look and tell you afterwards. But I met this really nice family who are Australian and who moved here about 10 years ago, and they make a wine in Castillon. And anyway, for the first 5 years that they were here, they made a wine like every other Bordeaux wine, so Chateau XYZ, in a traditional bottle with a traditional label. I know they were selling, but not that easily. They were finding it pretty hard. Anyway, and I was tasting En Primeur, and I saw this wine that had a really unusual label, and it was delicious, and I think it was unoaked. It was really fresh and fruity. And I said, it's quite rare to do this during a tasting, but I said to the people who'd organised this tasting, can I go and visit this estate? Because I didn't know they were Australian. I didn't know anything. I just was interested by the wine. Anyway, so I went to meet them, and they said that their youngest son, so they were probably in their late 50s, I don't know, early 60s, I'm not sure, but the owners. Anyway, but their son, who was in his 20s or 30s, said to them, do something different. Why be like every other Castillon producer? Let's change this up. So they now make maybe 6 or 7 different bottlings of different single varieties, low sulfur, mainly unoaked. I think, again, they're in conversion to be organic. And the labels are really unusual and fresh, and they're all palindromes. So they all say the same thing back to front. And it was great. And I thought, good for you. And it's made a big difference to their sales because they're doing something a bit different in an appellation which is generally quite conservative. So good for them.
Amazing. So, and for everyone listening, I will get the name of that winery and I will put it in the show notes so you can check them out. So this is one of the sub-regions, part of the Côtes de Bordeaux, and there's several, isn't there? But in general, there's lots of satellites. So would you say this is a specific small sub-region that, offers really good value that people should be going to? Or do you have a few others that you feel are kind of together really rising the tide? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think Castillon is definitely one that I would recommend. There's another one called Fronsac. So Fronsac near to Saint-Emilion, same kind of limestone soils as Saint-Emilion, but generally speaking, much less expensive, and some delicious, delicious wines. Lalonde de Pomerol, so right next to Pomerol, less expensive, less consistent. I think that's one of the things that you could maybe say about these appellations which are less well known a bit further out. You might need to do a bit more research to be sure that you're getting the good ones. But when you get the good ones, they're completely delicious, often absolutely just as good as from the more prestigious appellations, but half the price. So I think it's always worth doing a little bit of exploration. And in fact, that's one of the things, again, with Inside Bordeaux, when I was looking at terroir, one of the reasons that I thought it matters for people to learn just a tiny bit about the soils, which, by the way, no one would think twice of doing in Burgundy. That's the way that often people will be buying in Burgundy. But there's been a feeling that it's less helpful in Bordeaux, but it is even more helpful in Bordeaux because this is such a big region and so much wine is produced. And so if you can just, get a little bit of understanding of what does limestone do to a wine, which generally speaking, if your wine is on limestone, it might have a bit more of that kind of like salinity on the finish. It might be like really mouth-watering finish. It might be a little bit these kind of fresh fruits. There's lots of things that I love about wine that's grown on limestone. Anyway, once you have that tiny little bit of knowledge, that's like a little key into the door, you then can think, okay, well, rather than spending €100 on that from a Saint-Emilion top plateau, I'm going to go to Fronsac and find a similar kind of soil from a good producer, and then I'm going to get that similar kind of feel, but for less money. So I think it's a nice way to kind of take control for yourself of the wines that you're looking for, how you're making your buying decisions, and you can do it, generally speaking, without spending so much money.
Well, now, so I want to then jump to your maps that you are releasing, because if I'm right, I was seeing you, I think there's a lovely reel, everybody, on Instagram, on Jane's Instagram. Again, I'll put that in the show notes. And you're opening up one of your beautiful maps and you're covering it with, you're showing the soils, aren't you, across the whole region, right?
Yeah, exactly. So with the book, it was actually one of the first things that I said when I was asked to write this Bordeaux book, was that I wanted to have an emphasis on these soils. It's not the only part of the book, by the way. If anyone's thinking they're going to fall asleep reading this book, it is not the only part. But it's something which is different, that hadn't really been talked about before in the context of Bordeaux. Anyway, so it was kind of like a bit of a treasure hunt when I was doing the research. I had to go out and find the people who'd done all of these different studies, but they'd never been brought together before. Lots of them hadn't even been published, certainly not in English. And in a couple of places, I heard about people who'd done studies, but that they were a bit difficult, or they were kind of didn't want to share them. So a lot of it was me going to find these researchers and try and be super, super nice to them and ask them, would they mind if I could maybe have a look, and then could we publish them? So we had one professor who's called Kees van Leeuwen, who's Dutch and wonderful, wonderful guy, and very, very talented professor. He was like my scientific advisor, and he oversaw everything. But in the book, it wasn't possible to show all of the chateau locations plus the terroir underneath. It was just too complicated in a book. So what we did was we did it as gatefolds. So you have one half, they're beautiful gatefolds. One half has like a classic, this is the appellation and here are all the chateau locations. And then on the other side of the gatefold, it has all the different terroir. So this is where the limestone is, this is where the gravel is, this is where the soil is. And you could look from one side to the other and you'd work out what they're like. But anyway, we've always thought these would be awesome as maps, like proper maps that you can put on your wall. You go to any wine shop world over, what do you see? You see Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuits, the two big Burgundy maps. And you never see one of Bordeaux. There haven't been any. And so with our wonderful designers that we've been working with for the book, we asked them if they could put these together to something that we could put on the walls. And so now we do have, they're layered over the terroir, and you can see where the chateaus are. And it's because it's at a bigger size. So it makes more sense. It's still clear. And it's just so beautifully, beautifully designed. So yes, so they've just come out 2 weeks ago. At this stage, we just wanted to see would it work. It was just like a dip in the water. So we released 100 copies each of two different maps. So one was Santa Steph, Pauillac, Saint Julien, so left bank. And the other one was the right bank, so really all over the right bank, Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, Castillon, the satellites. And they're just gorgeous. They're so gorgeous. One of them on the right bank, it's lots of yellows and these beautiful colours that reflect the different types of soil. On the left bank, it's more kind of gentle colours because there's more gravel over on the left bank. So they look different and they're beautiful. And they sold out in 2 weeks. So we did 100 numbered signed of each one. And now later in the year, we'll do another print. But this time we won't number and sign. This time we will release them more generally. And we'll also do another map. We think of Margaux and of Pomerol, like a close-up of Pomerol. We're just deciding what we're going to do for the end of the year. But it's been super exciting that I'm now in the map business. It's great.
But actually, maps are beautiful when you're passionate about wine regions and even going to visit and just understanding the intricacies. And when we keep on throwing out the word terroir, just to kind of go, okay, yeah, and seeing maybe different altitudes and knowing how this will affect things. So does everybody need to go to your website then so that they can know the moment that the next batch is out?
That's right. Yeah. Well, we're going to have, we'll have a sign up so you can just leave your email and we'll let people know when they come out. But they do look beautiful. I would love everyone to go and have a look and to see them. And it's one of the things that's been so fun about starting my own site. So now it's been about 2.5 years. And so doing the mentor week, doing the maps. I've released some Christmas cards over the last 2 years that I've got to say have not been taken up as enthusiastically. I seem to have launched Christmas cards at exactly the time that nobody sends Christmas cards anymore. But it's just super fun having my own small business and thinking differently of how can I do things that are fun and which connect with people differently, and that it's been great.
Perfect. Well, I'll brainstorm if I think of anything else for Bordeaux related and interesting. I'll let you know. Everyone listening, what do you guys want that's Bordeaux related? Email me and I'll pass it on, and it may well be created by Jane. We'll see.
I'm up for anything.
So I want to pick your brain about maybe everybody who's into Bordeaux knows Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and we know there's a little bit of Malbec still and Carmenère, Petit Verdot. They're the grape varieties. But there are lesser known grape varieties. There are some very historic old varieties, and I've heard on the grapevine, no pun intended, that actually some of them are kind of having their own revival. Or have I just made that up? So tell me what your thoughts are. Is there anything going on with some older, unknown Bordeaux varieties?
Yeah, no, that is another kind of shift that's happening right now, partly connected to climate change. So over the last couple of years, there have been lots of studies of what should we do to future-proof this region, as with many other regions. So there are a couple of grape varieties which have kind of now got the go-ahead, the green light to be planted only as an experimental. I think you can only use, I think they have to be 5% of plantings of the overall vineyard, and they can be 10% of the blend. And for the next 10 years, it's just experimental. And if it doesn't work, they might have to pull them up again. So it's a bit of a gamble, but still, I'll give you the names of these ones. So Touriga Nacional, which is a Portuguese variety, but that is being allowed to be planted here. And then Marselan. Marselan is a really interesting variety because it is a cross of Cabernet Sauvignon. And so now I can't remember, is it Grenache? Can you remember what's the cross of Marselan? It's Cabernet plus another one from the south of France.
Grenache. As far as I'm concerned, it's Grenache.
So I actually really like Marselan in China. We're bringing it back to China. When I was just doing this competition a couple of weeks ago.
They love it there, don't they?
Oh my God, and there's some delicious Marselans. In fact, the winner, again, this was blind, so we didn't know until the end, but the winner of the best wine in China was a Marselan. And it was fantastic. It was delicious from the Ningxia region. Anyway, so that's being allowed here. And then there's one called Castex. And Castex, super interesting because Castex was in Bordeaux 18th, 19th century. So it really is an old variety, which they're starting to look at.
Very historic, isn't it?
I think that one could work. There's one other red, which is from the southwest of France. And then there's two whites. But also happening at the same time. So that's like the official, get the official stamp, you can try those. But at the same time, as you say, there's also a lot of producers who are starting to really look back into the archives, into the history books, and to plant some of these older varieties. Now, there's one person that's everyone's probably heard of, super famous, called Liber Pater. So he's selling his bottle at 30,000 euros per bottle.
Oh, gosh.
This kind of crazy, crazy scheme. But there is one I would like to point out.
Not cheap.
No, that is not cheap. And there's another couple of producers who are really worth looking at, who are also trying out old varieties, but who are not charging anywhere near as much as that. So they'll have to be bottled as Vin de France, so like a French wine as opposed to Bordeaux, because they're not Bordeaux varieties. But they are some fantastic wines. There's one called Chateau Casabon. So Chateau Casabon is a guy called somebody Duquesnes. What's his first name? Jean-Baptiste, I think. Anyway, he's really interesting. He came from outside of the wine industry, but grew up around here, but worked in something else, worked in tech, I think, came back to Bordeaux, and he's got 60 different varieties planted in his vineyards, and he's trying all of them and he's bottling them separately. He's in that Bordeaux Pirates group. In fact, I think he may have started the Bordeaux Pirates group, and he really embodies the spirit of Bordeaux Pirates, which is do things differently, just try it out, just see what's going to happen. And yeah, he's definitely somebody who I would recommend following. And his wines are really inexpensive, and some of them are great. So 60 different varieties. He's in a part of Bordeaux where the land isn't so prestigious, therefore not so expensive, per hectare. So I guess that's helpful as well when you're doing all of these experimentations. But he bottles some as sparkling wines, some as still, from all of the different colours. He has an orange wine. He's just somebody who's just trying different things, and he's definitely worth following, I would say.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of, you're saying like people doing things different. I mentioned actually this on a few episodes ago. I was reading in one of the decanter magazines and I did a little bit of exploration on the internet after this agroforestry. So it seems, and I don't know whether you're hearing more about this, but there's quite a few wineries or chateaus that are now actually planting trees in between the rows. Great anyway for biodiversity, great for climate change, but of course it's shading the vines if it's in a place that's now getting too hot. So have you been hearing more about this agroforestry in Bordeaux? Is there a bit of a buzz with this, maybe?
There's a definite buzz with this. And there's even some of the really well-known estates. So you have Lafitte Rothschild, Cheval Blanc, Larrivée Aubryon. So these are three really, really well-known properties who are following this idea of agroforestry where you're planting trees among the vines. In the case of Lafitte and Cheval Blanc, those are vines which are worth many, many millions per hectare. So it's not a small thing to pull up vines to plant trees in between them. Cheval Blanc was doing it for about 10 years before they even began talking about it. So that's been great for them. Larrivée Aubryon has just announced a big, big program where they've taken one area of their vineyard which just wasn't producing to the standard that they wanted it to, and they've been planting. What they're trying to do is to plant different types of trees to help things like attracting the right kinds of insects, attracting the right birds and owls and things to help cut down on having to use pesticides. There's the idea of shade, as you say, shade in the vineyard. That's becoming increasingly important. And generally the promoting the idea of biodiversity. There's also a fantastic initiative going on from a chateau called Dozac, which is in Margaux, and they're making a carbon neutral wine. So it's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon wine, which is being entirely bottled, and basically every step is about being carbon neutral, right up to the point where any of the barrel makers that they're using for the aging have to be local barrel makers, and they have to be low impact barrels. They're having local suppliers for the corks. Can the corks possibly be local? I don't know. Maybe, I'm not sure about the corks, to be honest, but they're using vegetable wax capsules rather than anything else. They're using reused bottles. So the bottles will have been used previously, sterilized and reworked to be, so everything is about zero carbon. And also the distribution will be only local. So it'll be a short circuit distribution. And this is a classified estate in Margaux. So even at the top, people are trying to think, how do we do things differently? So yeah, there's definitely a sense in Bordeaux of trying to reinvent and to look at new ways of bringing products to market.
So interesting. The fact that actually, I think when a lot of people think of Bordeaux, there's just, this is historic, big chateau buildings. You can't ever go and visit. No one's interested. It's kind of separate from the rest of the world. And actually, there's so much. I love the fact you've even just mentioned Bordeaux Pirates, which I've never heard of. So you've got, and I was really shocked, everyone is, even with this humid and crazy climate chaos, going towards this more kind of organic farming. And you've got even like Chateau Palmer, I think, have now gone biodynamic as well. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So if the bigger estates are doing that now, are you finding then the smaller estates who are actually with smaller holdings, a little bit more free, are really coming up and showcasing their, is organic the focus? I think that's probably where I want to ask the question. Do you think that that's where a lot of the Bordeaux wineries and chateaus are trying to be? Is that where they think they need to go?
I think what's happening is that there have been a lot of the smaller estates who've been doing this for a long time, but maybe not getting the credit for it. And then along come the big names, and they're very helpful in shining a light on what's been happening for many of the smaller properties for a long time. The hard thing is when things happen like mildew and all of these issues, you need manpower to be able to react to it. You need to have the money to be able to take the smaller yields and all of that. And because right now in Bordeaux, a lot of the smaller producers are truly struggling, I think that's a big challenge. It's a big challenge going forward, is how do you ensure that the whole region can benefit from these, we all know now, all of stuff like agroforestry and organic biodynamic. We know the benefits that it can bring, but how do we ensure that can be achieved when there are all of these issues financially.
Profitable,
so I think
sustainable.
Exactly. We need to look. There is one thing that's really positive, actually. The less expensive regions, when you're trying to sell the land per hectare, you do actually, if you're organic, you can sell your land for more. So it's not just about the bottle price, but if you're looking to sell the estate, you do actually get a higher price per hectare if you're organic to non-organic. And that's brilliant. That's a super positive development in terms of encouraging people to continue being organic.
Interesting. Is there anybody actually pioneering it? Is there one or two names that are really showcasing how to do this?
Definitely. So at the top, as you say, Parma, Ponte Cane, really very important. There's a lovely estate called Fontplegard over in Saint-Emilion, which has been doing it for many, many years and makes brilliant wines. I would go down to Casabon. As I said, Casabon down in Grave is brilliant. Oh, I know another one that's fantastic is Climons. Climons is down in Sauternes, has been really leading the way for biodynamics for many, many, many years. There are a number. I would really recommend people go and look at Bordeaux Pirates, because they're all organic or in conversion. And they're mainly smaller independent guys, so less expensive, and also people that we should support because they're the ones who are out there doing this, even though they don't have massive money behind them.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, and it's all about if the weather treats them well, when you're being organic, you obviously have to work a hell of a lot harder to make sure that you don't lose your grapes. So it is super, super difficult. So I just wanted to kind of obviously touch on vintages for a second, because obviously we know 2009, 2010, 2000, there are some very iconic vintages, obviously, and way back in the past as well. But I'm just probably focusing on the slightly more current ones. For you being there, are there any maybe slightly lesser vintages that people have got less excited about that actually you think are actually quite interesting, or one or two that we should maybe we can get some good value out of because they didn't get as much attention?
The way Bordeaux often prices its vintages as well is that the ones that are seen as being the best are the most expensive, but often they're the ones that you have to wait the longest. So I try and think of vintages in terms of how long do I have to wait to open it, as opposed to how good necessarily. So 2010, 2016, two brilliant vintages, both pretty highly priced, but both you're going to have to wait. For any of the big names, you're waiting 10, 15 years before you can drink it. 2017 is a vintage which nobody really thought that much of at the time, including me. It's fine, good, but not incredible. But because of that, it's ready to be drunk a little bit younger. And so right now, if you're opening a 2017, you're often going to get completely delicious wine. But maybe in another 5 or 10 years, it might be past it and you're not going to want it. But opening it now is delicious. So my big recommendation would be 2017, maybe from Saint-Emilion on that limestone plateau, a wine like Chateau La Roque, which is really great value and delicious. Chateau La Serre, again, really great value. Those wines in 2017 are tasting great right now.
So you've mentioned those two producers. Are there any other smaller producers that you're particularly really enjoying that you feel deserve a little bit of light that actually people could go out and search and purchase?
So this week I'm publishing a really nice tasting about small Margaux. So Margaux is an appellation which is, very famous and lots of expensive wines in Margaux, including Chateau Margaux. But I did a tasting of non-classified, so the small guys in that appellation. And there are a couple that I really recommend. And in fact, this is an organic one that I could have mentioned before, biodynamic. It's called Closerie des Moussis. Moussis is Moussis. And it's run by two women who have been making the wine there for about the last 10 years. It's small. I think there's only 2.5 hectares. So it's not easy to find, but it's really worth tracking down. It's so delicious. It's got real energy to it. It's very different it has the floral aspects of Margaux, but it has real energy, and it's great, really mouth-watering. I love it. I was tasting the 2020 vintage, which is a good vintage. That's again a good vintage where you can find quality at lots of different price levels. That's delicious. And there was a new one in the same appellation that I had never tasted before that was called Clos Dufour, Dufourg, I think. And that, again, really new, first vintage 2019. Oh, I've got another good one, actually. Anyway, so that was delicious. And those were two that I really enjoyed at this tasting. And I've just remembered another cool one. It's not organic or biodynamic, but it's again new. And it's always fun, I think. We think of Bordeaux as everything's like 500 years old. Well, this is again one which the first vintage was in 2021, I think. And it's called Clos Cabana. It's a great name, Clos Cabana, like a cabana boy or whatever.
Oh, I like the name. Yes.
They chose the name Clos Cabana because they knew it would be easy for people to remember. Anyway, and this is in Pessac-Léognan, which is a lovely appellation I really like. And it's two childhood friends. So they were school friends. And then they went off and they did their own different things. And they're still late 20s or maybe early 30s now. And they thought, you know what, let's do what we've always dreamed of and start this estate. So again, it's really small, so not massive production, but they're just on their second vintage, I think. And it's great wine and worth tracking down.
No, I mean, just to finish off, like I think I mentioned that, sometimes the reputation of Bordeaux is that it's very closed off to the public. But actually what you're showcasing is there's actually a lot of energy. I think, younger generation, younger winemakers doing some exciting things. Do you think that there is a specific wine region within Bordeaux that's easier to go and visit to get more appointments, or they're actually open to the public a little bit more? What's your perception on that?
Yeah, so I think if you're coming here and you're wanting to find places to go, I think there's two regions that are worth going to. So first of all, Saint-Emilion. Saint-Emilion, easy to get to on a train from Bordeaux Centre, and lots of estates that you can walk to. And it's very pretty. It's like an old 18th century village, lots of wine shops, lots of restaurants. It's a super fun place to go. And then the other one is Pessac-Léognan. So Pessac-Léognan, you can get a tram, actually. You can get a tram out from Bordeaux to a good number of estates that you could get to by tram. But I think they've actually just started a new thing where you get a tram out as far as you can, and then you can get a bike and you can cycle around from there, which would be a fun thing to do. But there's a couple of properties there that are so worth going to. And how have we not talked about the fact that Bordeaux did get two big boosts last year, and both ended up actually at this property. So Smith Haute Lafitte, which is in Pessac-Léognan, really fantastic. If you like wine tourism, it has this amazing hotel with a spa where you can have like a wine, bath in red wine and all kinds of, it's super, super fun. But it's where King Charles and Camilla went to, because it's, again, organic, biodynamic. And obviously King Charles has always been interested in organic. So he went and spent the day with them or an hour, I don't know how long, but sometime at Smith Haute Lafitte. So fun to go and see where Charles and Camilla went to. And then also it's the same place where Beyonce and Jay-Z stayed when they were in Bordeaux last year as well. So Smith Haute Lafitte has got to get a notice for its attracting royalty of all kinds.
Yeah, exactly. The real royalty, and then the fun kind, the cult kind. Oh, amazing. Okay, well, now I have to go there so that, the Yanina kind have also visited. Then I can be added to the list. King Charles, Beyonce and Yanina have stayed there. So you've got to.
Exactly right.
Oh, dearie me. So to conclude, honestly, Jane, you are brilliant. Thank you so much for just shedding a light on some of the lesser known regions and grapes and things happening. Everybody needs to go to your website, which is janeanson.com, right?
Exactly. Very easy.
Perfect. And then they'll be able to look at the maps. They'll be able to sign up. They'll be able to see what wines you've tasted for En Premier. They'll see where they can buy your book, Inside Bordeaux, and just learn everything, can use it as a Bible and just completely enhance their knowledge of everything happening in this very cool and historic, but quite interesting wine region, right?
Oh, thank you. It's been so nice chatting to you. It's been great.
Perfect. Well, I look forward to seeing you in real life, and thank you for all the information. See you soon.
Thank you so much. See you soon. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Well, I think we all know that Bordeaux has such incredible history, but hopefully this episode has highlighted there's actually a lot of movement, a lot of shakers, exciting things happening in the Bordeaux region. But to finish off, I have a wine quote from Émile Peinard, who was the legendary enologist who influenced winemaking in Bordeaux and all over the world. And I love this quote from his book, The Taste of Wine, The Art and Science of Wine Appreciation. And he said, "A wine taster carries his tasting equipment with him wherever he goes, but it is at home that it is most finely tuned." I totally agree. The beauty of being in your own home, savouring a glass of wine, where you can unwind, let go of the day's stresses with that profound sense of comfort and contentment. So I invite you, as the episode finishes, to curl up on the sofa with a delicious glass of wine and a few nibbles and savour every sip. Now, next week, I am going to take us to Jumilla, the wine region in the southeastern part of Spain, mainly in the province of Murcia. Now, this is a trip I went on several weeks ago with incredibly old vines. This is a region that focuses on Monastrell, and I'm going to tell you all about it next week. So may you make a ritual of your wine this week. Pour it, swirl it, taste that wine, make it a meditative experience, connect to the art of winemaking, and I will see you all back here next Monday. Until then, wine friends, cheers to you.